Oh man, there's so many moments now in the comic books that are like coming back to me. Like when Scott comes back with Lisa, and then like at the end how Scott does form Shatterband with Kim,
Yeah.
and they do a bad cover of "I'm a
I'm
Believer."
a believer.
I thought love was something, something fairy tales.
What does Young Neil says? That was an extremely bad cover of I'm a Believer by the Monkees.
All right, welcome back to the Why Do I Talk to You podcast. I think I'm still Saul Starsheep 4. I've been really considering changing that because of every time I have to do this intro, I'm always reconsidering changing my gamer tag. Who are you again?
I'm Dave Gamer, Dave Naple. Maybe if you said it with more confidence, it would, that would make the
It
difference.
kind of doesn't allow me any confidence.
Why not? It's like, hey, I'm Saul Starsheep 4. This is my co-host, Dave Gamer, Dave Naple.
One of these is not like the other.
Yeah, I have confidence.
All right. We're talking about Scott Pilgrim versus the World today.
Yes,
Let's just cut straight to the chase. I like our planning of this episode and our previous episode, Epic Mickey, because both of these little things of nerd / pop culture kind of popped up around the same time for me, at least.
Yeah. You really have a seasonal sort of attachment to different things in life, don't you?
I really do.
Yeah. So we're not going to be able to do an episode on Muppet Treasure Island until the summer, are we?
I mean, it's Muppet Treasure Island. I'll make an exception.
Last time I asked you when we actually seriously talked about watching Muppet Treasure Island, like, no, it's not the summer yet. I've got to watch it at the start of summer. That's how it works.
I'll make an exception for Muppet Treasure
That's
Island.
how you are with Christmas too, although that's fair. I
Yes,
respect that.
please, thank you. Sheesh. Which means we can't do any Christmas, like our one Christmas movie podcast until after Thanksgiving.
Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh. So picky.
Rules are rules, Dave.
Oh man.
I didn't make them. I just abide by them.
Fine.
I totally made them up.
I know.
So today we're talking about Scott Pilgrim versus the World. This is a huge thing that Dave and I share in common that we just both love, like 100%.
Yeah.
I don't know if we are like totally 100% in on like everything this franchise offers, but we've read all the books. We've watched the movie upwards of 100 times.
We've played the video game.
We played the video game.
Yeah. It's kind of, we're such nerdos, but we're not really like we're not like in with any of the like, the hardcore crowd. Like we love Pokemon, but we don't love it enough to be like, a strict Pokemon podcast, so like in the Pokemon crowd, Like we don't do competitive battling, we don't finish our Pokedex, and we don't do any of that stuff. But we still love it, and that's kind of how we are with this franchise too.
Yeah, because like I don't think you'll be seeing any of us cosplaying as like.
Oh, that would be awesome.
I might be able to cosplay as like Como.
It's Como.
I might.
It's kind of obscure.
I'm trying to think about who you
I could pull off Scott.
You could pull off movie Scott for sure.
Yeah. I mean, he's kind of got, like, gruffly hair in the book, too. A little bit.
Kind of. Not as much as, because you have to have the shaggy hair, and then you got to put on your hat
I
right
need
away.
that. I want that hat so bad.
I got to teach you bass guitar, too.
Oh, that would be awesome. Anyway.
You'll get all the ladies. All right, so...
Said no bass player ever.
Oh.
All right, anyway.
So the start of Scott Pilgrim Dumb for us, I believe, actually begins with me.
Yep.
I think, we had sort of seen trailers or commercials or what have you for Scott Pilgrim, but
they didn't do like anything.
No, because we had no idea what it was.
Yeah.
This was like during the summer before our last year at college at CBU. And it was still the summer, so the term hadn't started yet. I was coming to the campus every once in a while to meet with my friend Chris, because we were trying to write a percussion ensemble piece together. And one day we come and we meet, and he was just all like, I have the perfect movie for you and Dave.
Yeah, it was.
I was like, what movie's that? He was like, Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And like, it had been out for maybe three-ish weeks or something like that. And it didn't really even make a huge like thing at the box office either. So I was just like, what did you just say to me? And he was like, it's like the perfect movie for you guys. I'm like, I mean, did you like the movie? He's like, yeah, I liked it, but you guys would love it even more. I'm like, why? And he's like, oh, because it's got like a lot of video game stuff in it and like whatnot. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess.
And you're always very careful of being pandered to.
This will be a separate rant, but it does go to Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah.
But that'll be a separate thing. But yes, I'm very careful of being a product of a focus group of like, oh, so, you know, we need to attract more of the loser gamers. And so they think of me and Dave.
And so they call us in. We're just like, hey guys. Like, what would you guys like? Like, I don't know, man. I don't know. Put the video games in it, I guess.
Oh, are these Super Mario themed fruit roll-ups? Man, I love these.
Oh, put it in.
So, yes, I'm very careful of that. Call it pride, but you know, as much pride as a loser like me can have.
You got it.
I guess.
Yeah.
At least I walk outside with my pants on. That's pride.
Is that a thing?
Sure.
Okay.
Anyways, so I took his bait. And you know, Dave lived in San Diego all his life, and so during the summer we didn't really hang out much. I think you had finally moved back for the term.
I guess I must have. The time frame of this is really hazy to me.
I feel like it's late August because I remember it being hot.
Maybe we should look up when this movie released.
All right. So in either case, we were able to meet up and we went to the movie theater close by to CBU. And it was interesting because both of us had like very little what to expect. I think like at that point we might have like done some base research on like what this was.
I don't think I even had.
No?
No, I don't think I had at all.
Okay. I might have just like, oh, it's based off of a graphic novel. And then that was it. So we go into the theater. There was barely anybody else in there. And Dave and I were just rolling in the aisles.
Yeah, so it came out in like mid-August. So it must have been like late summer, which is why we were able to see it together.
Before rehearsal camp, too.
Well, that's when it came out. I don't know how long it was in theaters, but yeah, I don't know. That's
because I know we didn't see it when term started yet.
Okay.
I know that for sure, at least.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, anyways, and so we saw it, and we were just like rolling in the aisles. I mean, like it's one of those movies where like, because I'm a giggler. I giggle a lot, and so whenever I'm in a movie or something, and a scene is just like that funny, I'm laughing for like the next two scenes.
Yeah.
And so like I feel bad because I'm just an obnoxious clod at that point, and I'm just like I'm stuffing my face in my hands to like block off my laughter and stuff.
Yeah.
And Dave was a little similar in this movie too.
And that is not usual for me. I am not like that. So yeah, I don't think there's no other movie. There's no other movie. There was like a comedy show that I saw a couple of times with my grandfather when I was in middle school that made me laugh this hard. That's very obscure.
Like a stand-up comedy show?
It was a show called Triple Espresso. I don't know how to describe it other than it was a comedy show that was playing in downtown San Diego, and it made me laugh a lot. So it was like a play.
Okay.
But yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
random reference, but yeah, those are pretty much the only two times I remember laughing this hard, like in a like theater, like when the performance is going on.
Oh my gosh. So after we got out of the movie, yeah, we were like full of energy, and we were like all in on the whole Scott Pilgrim franchise.
Yeah, we like immediately started trying to find like everything out we could about this.
So the next thing would have been obviously to get into the books, because you know a lot of people I think who saw this movie were probably book fans first, because I don't think it did well in the box office, did it?
It actually didn't. Which is
Yeah.
very sad.
Did it bomb?
I think it said they made like 47 million and the production budget was like 85.
Oh, so
So-
that's a bomb.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, I mean, you know, if they don't make their money back in profit, then they call it a bomb.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Sad.
We did our part. How many did we see it multiple times together?
I didn't. I don't know if you saw it again
I feel like I saw it in theaters the second time, but I don't know. I could be wrong.
with Sam or
We
something.
certainly bought the Blu-ray collector's edition DVD. At least I did.
And the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of months later,
We
like
certainly made Bryan Lee O'Malley his money back. We bought all the other stuff from the series. So
because a couple of months after that, I mean, we're still sort of talking about it. And like the next obvious step would have been to get the books. But we're broke college students, so we couldn't just like go out and get it. One day though, I just decided, you know what? I want
has to
these.
happen. Yeah.
And so I think we went to a bookstore together.
We would go a few times together, and we would like pine over them. We would like find that section, and be like, I really want these.
And then I finally just said, like, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm just going to get the first 2 because there's 6 of them.
Yeah.
As I'm just going to get the first 2 and that'll appease me for a little bit. I read them both within like an hour.
Yeah. You blaze through them. You totally do.
And then eventually I forget if I just got them through Amazon or if I just like went to a bookstore and just like, you know, ripped the bandage off and just got them all. But then, you know, I was able to read them all. Mm-hmm. That semester in itself was really busy for me. I had a lot of stuff going on that semester. That was the second to last one in college.
This would have all been at the same time as Epic Mickey too.
Yeah.
Funny.
The big thing that I remember as far as my studies go in this time was Dave and I again were also in a production of Man of La Mancha at the school.
really fun.
We were in the pit orchestra. He played clarinet, I played percussion. That was a really fun show. And much like other times we did pit orchestras, there's a lot of times where there is just nothing to do. And since you're out of sight from the audience, we were like in the backstage orchestra also. We weren't just like in the floor.
Yeah.
We all like, you know, the conductor, Dr. Miller, like he brought in like snacks and like an electric kettle.
What an awesome guy.
Yeah, man. I miss
Dr. Miller,
him.
if you're listening to this, shout out to you. We miss you. You're awesome. We hope you're doing well.
Everybody brought like snacks, and you know, Dave and I brought our Game Boys, or you know, in his case, his DS.
Yeah. That was when I was playing Final Fantasy IV.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, it wasn't. That was the one before. Never mind. Scratch that. Reverse it.
Wait.
What? Anyway.
Okay. And I brought all 6 books of Scott Pilgrim. And I remember, like, you know, Channy was there and he was like, can I read those too? I'm like, yeah, sure.
And
Spread
Vince.
it. Yeah. Like, Schmutzer was there
Yeah.
and spreading the wealth. Like, Scott Pilgrim was just like all throughout my whole semester there. And even the books that I had like read already, I was just rereading them.
Yeah.
Dave, a couple years later, finally got himself a PS3 and so was able to get the video game. You can tell us about the video game?
Not a whole lot. I feel bad because I didn't do much research on this, like who made it or whatever. The only thing I really know is that the soundtrack was done by Anamanaguchi, and it's awesome. It just all feels so appropriate. It's a beat 'em up with RPG elements, which is pretty much exactly what you would expect to be based on the movie. It just feels super true. And the books, it just feels super true to everything, and it is more based on the book, and all the animation looks just like it, and it's like the sort of faux 8-bit style where it's closer to 16-bit, but they try to make everything a little blocky to be like, oh, it's 8-bit, but it's too good to be 8-bit, but this is fine. It just looks really classic, and it's a beat 'em up, and you go through and you beat guys up, and it's fun, and it's multiplayer.
Dave and I was able to play that game in one sitting, one time, we were hanging out, and I do not regret it one bit.
Yeah.
So again, suffice it to say that we are all in on the Scott Pilgrim franchise and Bryan Lee O'Malley's work. For this,
We even tried out some of his other stuff.
yeah, I like Seconds.
Seconds was good. What
Yeah.
was the other one that you didn't like? but I liked?
Lost or something.
Yeah.
Lost at
I
Sea.
remember liking that. Anyway.
I did read that. Yeah, it was okay. A little more deep and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, for the sake of this podcast, you know, if we were to focus on the books, this podcast would be at least 3 hours long.
Yeah.
But however, in this case, this is a rare instance where the movie adaptation is incredibly faithful to the books. It is almost
really good.
obscenely faithful.
And it's interesting because the things they change, you're like, I kind of almost like that better. There's a few things that just kind of get left out, right? That just get left on the cutting room floor because you've got an hour and a half movie as opposed to 6 books, and there's just no way you can fit all this stuff in there. And those things get left out, and you're sad. And so you can be like, oh, I really missed out on all this and all this development, and that's too bad. So like, the books are still better than the movie, but the movie is one of the most like faithful and interesting interpretations of this art style that you will ever see, and it's still really, really good. And the stuff that the movie adds, as opposed to feeling like it's tacked on, like that happens in a lot of movies where they'll add something that's on the book and it just doesn't work. It doesn't feel natural. In this, it actually like feels like it works, and that's pretty impressive. So, and it's weird we're talking like we did read. It's weird because we like have to compare it to the books because now we've read them, but at the time we had no idea. We weren't going in there like, we're fans, like, is this better than the books? We were just like, that movie was incredible. And that's sort of all there was. So I think we're gonna try to talk about the movie on its own merits, but we will definitely compare it to the books just because we love the books and we want to talk about them too. So.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Right now, fully open recommendation. Read the books.
Yeah, they're good.
It's graphic novels, so it's
they're
not
easy reads.
Yes. They're very easy reads.
There's color versions out now.
Oh, I still need to get those. Just money.
Just money.
All right, so here we go. Talking about the movie. The main cast: Scott Pilgrim is played by good old Michael Cera.
Yeah.
Ramona, who is the love interest, is played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead. And I mean, this is a bit of an ensemble cast as well. There are some other big names you may recognize. We have Chris Evans, Captain America.
Before he was Captain
America. Brandon Ruth is in it too, who was Superman in Superman Returns.
Oh yeah, which one was he?
He's Cody. Cody.
What? Who?
Why am what? Number 3.
Yeah.
Is it Cody?
No, it's not Cody. It's Todd.
You're right.
Who the heck is Cody?
Oh, my head. Oh.
It's,
Oh, my
Cody.
Head. Sorry. Moving on.
He's Todd.
Mae Whitman, who's the voice of she's the voice of Katara from Last Airbender, and she's also in Arrested Development along with Michael Cera.
Wait, who's she?
Roxy.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
This is all stuff. See, I don't know people, so I'm glad Saul's here to tell me this stuff.
Jason Schwartzman, who plays the main bad guy. Do you know who he is?
Well, if he's the main bad guy, he's Gideon.
No, I mean. Do you know?
No, I have no idea.
He plays Ash in Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Oh.
In Fantastic Mr. Fox. Don't interrupt me. I'm trying to teach you things. He's in a lot of Wes Anderson movies, and he's Ash in
Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else that's like big time that I need to mention?
Julie? Is she big time?
Aubrey Plaza, yeah.
Yeah.
Parks and Recreation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Wallace. He's known.
He's not.
Really?
He's a Culkin.
Right.
Kieran Culkin.
Yeah.
Sure. There's somebody else, I think. Brie Larson. She's she's Envy.
Oh. Okay.
I don't know what she's in, but I know she's kind of big time.
Okay.
So there's a lot of good notable names in this movie. Michael Cera and Mary Elizabeth Winstead are the tops, but there's a lot of more notable names.
Mm-hmm.
Again, here's gonna be the first comparison to the book.
Yeah.
Every supporting, I have to say supporting.
Yeah.
Every supporting character looks, acts, and feels like they were completely ripped straight from the book.
It's pretty incredible.
It's almost astounding how well they got these. Yeah. It is almost completely astounding how close they got them to the actual book iterations. Mm-hmm. Scott and Ramona, however, they're not quite so. And this isn't really too much of a criticism, but it is something that is different because the portrayal of Scott Pilgrim is very much a Michael Cera portrayal.
Yes.
If you've seen him in anything, you've seen his portrayal of Scott Pilgrim in here.
Yeah. And it works, but it's not the Scott Pilgrim from the book.
Right.
Yeah. That's the only way I can think to describe it.
Ramona in the movie is also a lot more standoffish and kind of mean.
She's very quiet and she doesn't smile very much.
Yeah.
I think she's supposed to feel sort of unapproachable.
Yeah.
Which she really isn't in the books.
No.
But they had to get her mysteriousness across in a much shorter period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, I could go with that.
I think Ramona and Scott in the books take some time for you to really get to know. I don't know. And so the Michael Cera version and the whatever her name is version in the movie, I forgot it. This is how bad I am. They come across a little bit quicker. It's faster for you to realize who these characters are supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And they still work more or less with the themes the book is trying to get across with these characters, but the characters themselves are not the same.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk a little bit about the story of it. I want to talk about the story. I'd also want to talk about the director style, like event, like after this too. So okay, the basic story is that it starts out straight away with some narration. Not so long ago, in the mysterious land of Toronto, Canada, Scott Pilgrim was dating a high schooler. That's how it starts. It just starts right away, like with that little bit of conflict.
With like text on the screen too, like this blocky sort of text.
And so Scott is in a band. They're called
Sex Babam.
They're called Sex Babam. They're like, it's kind of a bad band, but whatever. Eventually his girlfriend kind of like, it becomes their groupie because she like is completely enamored with him and the music.
This is not Ramona. This is his new girlfriend.
This is the high schooler girlfriend. Her name is Knives Chow.
Yeah.
She's Chinese.
She's Chinese.
And so as it progresses, all of a sudden, Scott sort of gets these like dream visions of this girl on roller skates.
They're rollerblades.
Are they? Oh, whatever.
I think so.
And it's just sort of like, who is this girl? And then like sees her in real life as well. So he's like completely crushing while he has this high school girlfriend. That, by the way, nobody like is for. Like everybody's always like, what are you doing, Scott?
Yeah. I mean, he's 20. How old? 25? 24.
They say it in the movie. What's wrong with you?
They do. 23. I think it's 23.
There goes my card that says I've seen this movie upwards of 100 times.
Yeah. He's like young 20. I'm trying to remember because Kim says, what are you, Scott? 28 or whatever.
I'm 23. 23 Kim's. I think it's 23. I don't know.
Anyway.
So
we can take our fan cards away later.
I guess so. I'm sorry. The vegan police will come.
All right.
We're referencing this movie upwards and sideways. So, okay. So then Scott finally Scott finds out that she works for Amazon, like as a courier, and so he orders something from Amazon, and she delivers it, and so they were able to go on a date. I'm blazing through, by the way, because I don't. Yeah. So they go on their like
the details.
Yeah, they go on their little date, and they kind of get a little hanky panky, but not all the way, and invites her to a show. And at the show, Knives happens to be there as well.
Yeah, because he hasn't broken up with her yet.
Right. And so they play their show because it's a battle of the bands to get into, to hopefully get a record deal by the end of it by G-Man Graves. In the middle of Sex Babam's set, a dude comes crashing through literally crashing through the venue. Yeah. His name is Matthew Patel, and he is Ramona's first evil ex-boyfriend.
And it's really hard. Like the visuals of this movie are so good. It's really hard to do this stuff justice without like seeing it.
I know.
Because everything has this comic style. It's like it's in a comic book in a way that I've never seen any movie do before.
Right.
And like everything, especially everything Matthew says, is like accompanied by a very like intentional motion, like a body motion. It's very, very well directed.
His actor was yet again completely perfectly cast.
Yeah.
So basically, well, they fight because Scott happens to be the best fighter in the province.
Yeah, well, they don't really explain it in the movie, but whatever.
I had to say that, though.
Yeah.
They fight. It's beautiful. It turns into a Bollywood dance sequence.
Yeah, it's well choreographed.
And so after that, Ramona has to sort of explain everything to him, which is that, if they're gonna date, that he has to defeat her 7 evil exes.
Yeah.
And so Scott agrees. They're together. He's officially cheating on Knives. So the next scene involves him actually breaking up with her, which is sad. Soon after
Knives
that,
is a very sympathetic character throughout the whole movie.
Yeah.
She's very likable. I don't know who her actress is, but
her name is
perfect.
Ellen. Her name is Ellen Wong. You can look her up.
Cool. She's great. Good job, Ellen.
If I recall, some of like the liner notes on like her performance was like her selling point on her audition was that she knew Taekwondo.
I'd bite on that. Yeah, I'd be like, all right, you're in. Like,
you're perfect.
Yeah, really.
So fast forwarding through some more scenes, Wallace's gay roommate is stalking.
Wallace is his gay roommate who is stalking.
Yes, who is stalking his celebrity crush. His name is Lucas Lee. And they happen to crash on his movie set where he's filming a new movie, but is also Ramona's second evil ex.
Yep.
And so they have a fight there. Man, Blazing Through is just so injustice.
How do you want to do it? You want to back up and do each thing scene by scene, X by X?
I don't know, man.
Let's do it X by X. Let's go back to Matthew. So there's a scene.
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and skip some things here, though.
Okay.
I'd like to skip to just talking about the director's style. You already kind of sort of talked about it. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay. So the director is Edgar Wright. If you don't know who he is, his most famous, well, he most recently did Baby Driver. A lot of people were talking about that movie.
Oh, okay.
And he also did the Simon Pegg Cornetto trilogy, Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and World's End. I think that's what it's called. That's the one.
I wasn't into those movies.
That's the one I haven't seen. Oh, you really should.
I saw them and I didn't like them.
Have you seen Hot Fuzz?
Yes.
That's a shame. I love
Sorry.
that movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he's most famous for doing that. He's also famous for having a very distinct directorial style.
Yeah.
You know, I guess similarly to Wes Anderson, you know, he has a unique style that everybody sort of knows. Only Edgar Wright does a lot of good action and comedy and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're familiar with the Cornetto trilogy or with Baby Driver, then you know what he does with the camera. You also probably, to get a good gauge of it, you should watch the YouTuber Every Frame a Painting, and he does a nice little like video essay on how Edgar Wright uses the frame as like his playground. You know, he's very good at using visual elements to sort of tell and push the story along, and that's what you need for a comic book adaptation.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't quite take it so over the edge like the original Hulk movie, where there's like panels, just sort of like, or you know, quote unquote panels. It just happens to be the frame inside of a square box that's like panning from left to right. Oh, it's comics or whatever. Or like maybe every once in a while, some things are like in that like yellow text. You know what I mean? That certainly happens in this movie, but it's never like hokey.
Yeah.
It seems perfectly natural, and it's there to serve a completely perfect purpose. At times you'll see a lot of like onomatopoeias come from like characters getting hit, like, you know, like flump or
a lot
like
of sound
prue
effects or
some,
words will show up like visually somehow.
Sometimes it will some like flashbacks are told in Bryan Lee O'Malley's comic book style.
Art style, yeah.
Sometimes there will be like jump cuts of like kind of like almost like old DBZ anime jump cuts where like a triangle of like a frame will show up, and then like another triangle of a frame will show up.
Yeah.
It's all just done really well. And you know what, Dave, I know you haven't seen this movie, but it doesn't have a family friendly title. Kick Butt.
Oh, I know the movie you're talking about.
Have you seen that movie?
No.
I've seen it, and it's the same sort of idea.
Is it by him?
No, it's not. It's by another guy.
Okay.
It's the same idea though of a graphic novel that got turned into a movie.
Right.
That is how not to do a comic book adaptation. I did not like that movie whatsoever. It was so like, if you've seen this movie, then maybe you can validate or tell me that my opinions are garbage, but like it was very ham-fisted. It was very much like, we're a comic. Yes, thank you. Can I watch the movie? But we're onomatopoeias.
It's really crazy how it doesn't feel like that in this movie, because it happens a lot. Like, it's all over the place, you know?
I guess it's also not just that, but also the video game elements are also around there too.
Yeah.
Like anytime there's a fight, you always have the scene of like Scott and like the other person like facing off each other with a versus in the middle.
Yeah.
And again, it's done so naturally because his style is so consistent throughout the movie that it's never out of place.
Yeah.
There's other things even meant for humor. Like there's a spot where Scott has to pee, and so he goes into the bathroom, and as soon as he closes the door, you see a pee meter just like blinking because it's like overflowing or about to, and then he goes and it drains in like less than a second.
Yeah,
and
it's
stuff.
very quick.
Little things like that, right?
Yeah.
There's also a lot of video game sound effects here and there, like especially from A Link to the Past, Zelda.
Yeah, they went to Nintendo specifically to ask for, because they use quite a few like actual songs from Legend of Zelda here and there, which is a nice touch. It works.
The humor also. I mean, how do you describe the humor in this movie?
Fast.
Everything
is very snappy.
Yeah.
Everything happens with really, really good timing.
There's never any moment where like they pause for audience laughter.
Yeah. It really keeps you on your toes. That's the best way I can think of to put it, you know? it's all very quick. It's all very clever. There are some parts that are kind of random and take you by surprise a little bit. But like we mentioned in El Dorado, it's like, oh, that's just the kind of movie this is. Like it breaks the fourth wall a couple times. Like Julie's cursing is the biggest one that stands out to me. And
As
that's
a
not
fourth
like,
wall break.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's not like one of my favorite jokes in this movie. But it like doesn't ruin anything, which I feel like in a lot of movies it would. It just rolls with itself very well.
There's I will say that actually all the jokes that are done like in dialogue, a lot of them are taken straight from the comic book.
Yes.
And it's amazing how well they work.
It really is. The delivery of them is really good.
Many of the jokes that are visual are probably Edgar Wright's brainchild, like Dave's favorite joke in the whole movie. Maybe you've seen a gif of this somewhere, but there's a spot where Knives, who is already broken up with Scott, goes to his house to look for him. Wallace opens the door and is like, is Scott there? And he just goes like, you know what?
This whole scene, I just want to break down. So he opens, they know that Knives is at the door because like she calls first for some reason. And so Scott is like standing there awkwardly in the middle of the door as Wallace goes to open it. And Wallace opens it, and for like a split second, he opens it to the point where you can see Scott, and then he closes it just enough so that he's not in the shot anymore. And the next thing you know, Knives says, "Is Scott here?" Wallace goes, you know what? And there's a tiny window to the top left of Wallace, and he just jumps right through it. And Wallace says, he just left.
And she just like
Looks crushed.
really? And he's like, yeah. And
As Scott reaches back into the window to grab his coat.
and he's just like, sorry. And as Scott is just running right behind
Yeah, as it
her.
pans back to Knives, looking disappointed, Scott's just walking off, like not in focus at all in the distance.
And you could say that doing a play-by-play on a scene like that is probably taking the magic out. Well, then watch the dang movie. You will love it even still.
Yeah.
Because it comes out of nowhere.
It's all just so fast. It's like something's happening. Like you get the heads up that like Knives is coming, so like you feel that tension really quick, and then it just immediately goes into funny. And every like moment is so like well placed. There's like a split second for you to laugh at the fact that he's like in the frame and then he's not, and then there's like a second for you to laugh for him jumping out, and then it immediately goes into grabbing his coat, and then immediately goes into him walking away. All just in this tight little window where everyone is playing their parts so perfectly.
Right. All right, so let's keep progressing then, I guess, in the movie, because now we're at Lucas Lee,
Yes.
who is, side note, we won't go into too much detail, but is completely different from his comic book iteration.
Yeah.
But is hilarious. Again, played by Chris Evans, Captain America.
That's a good job.
There's a big fight scene there. I don't even want to describe his character. It's just, he's hilarious.
Hilarious.
Yeah. Then we can go on to Evil X number 3. Please, what's his name again?
Todd.
Thank you. Todd Ingram, who is the bass player in the band called Clash at Demon Head, which is an NES game.
Yeah.
The name of an NES game. And the lead singer of that band is Envy Adams, who is Scott's big ex.
Yeah.
There's a scene where they're all just sort of chatting backstage because Sex Bomb played a show with them. Like,
Yeah, basically as part of their like machinations to get Scott there so Todd can crush him, and for Envy to, I don't know, enjoy watching him crush him, they invite Sex Bomb to play like the opener for them. And Steven Stills is the leader of the band and the talent. Can't say no.
And so Scott can't have it anymore, and he's about to lay one on to Todd, only to find out that Todd is psychic.
Todd is vegan.
Both of those answers are correct.
Yeah, both those answers are correct.
He has psychic powers because
he's a vegan.
because he's a vegan.
Being vegan just makes you better than most people.
So he has all these crazy psychic powers because he's a vegan, and they have a nice long fight. They even have a bass battle because Todd's the bass player in Clash of Demon Head, but
And
Todd
Scott-
is just
Scott's
is just
the bass
way better. But the way that Scott defeats him is
It's very like cliche, but it works because of like the added element. So he knocks him into like Todd knocks him into this coffee, and so Scott's like, "All right, you beat me. How about we have a drink to my memory?" And so he offers him a cup of coffee with soy milk in it. And so they're like, "We know what you're trying to do here. Like, you poured half and half in there." He's like, "I could see in your mind's eye. She poured half and half into one of those cups." And so he takes the one that he's not offering him, the one that doesn't have it in it, and he drinks it. And Scott says, "Actually, I poured into that one, but I thought really hard about pouring it into this one, my mind's eye or whatever."
It's like, what do you mean? You just said half and half, baby.
And then
The vegan
police show up. Isn't one of those guys like
Oh, one of those guys is something. I don't know who, though.
There's a reference in there, but
Yeah.
it's a little beyond me, certainly.
So basically, they go and they list his crimes, which go well beyond that.
Yeah.
Like, you're partaking of chicken parmesan.
Chicken isn't vegan?
So they take away his vegan powers.
Yeah.
And then then Scott is able to vanquish him.
At this point, the sort of conflict between Scott and Ramona starts coming into play. And we should probably talk about how that's done in the movie. Because the relationship between Scott and Ramona admittedly isn't the best in this movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you nailed it though because they had to rush it. They had more time to flesh it out in the books, obviously.
Yeah. In the movie, it basically comes down to, the fight with Todd specifically was just absolutely crushing to Scott. Like, he just gets thrown through every brick wall in the building and just gets the snot beat at him for the majority of the time. And so he is just not in. They make a big deal to constantly show that he's got a headache or that he is just in physical pain. And he's a little sick of dealing with this stuff. And at the same time, Ramona hasn't always been super supportive of him fighting her exes.
And also not really like telling him the whole story or anything like that.
Yeah, she kind of disappears after he fights the second, Lucas Lee. And she sticks around while he fights Todd, but I don't know. She's just kind of like, okay. She doesn't want to tell him the whole story of how they were dating, and he starts to pick up on the fact that she is the one who's broken up with all of her exes. Like, she's always been the dumper, not the dumpy.
Yeah.
And so this combined with his own insecurities, which is kind of played up more in the movie. In the movie, it's more about how insecure Scott is, right? It's more about the fact that he feels like when he got dumped by Envy, it was just crushing blow to his self-esteem. And there's a running gag where people will comment on his hair, and he makes like it obviously affects him. He's like, no, it's fine. And then the voiceover comes, Scott is acutely aware that his last haircut was exactly 431 days ago, right before Envy breaks up with him. And so it's just this sort of running gag that he doesn't think very highly of himself in a weird way, and he just sort of has these self-esteem issues. So when he finds out that Ramona's very mercurial and like she changes her hair like every week or whatever, he starts to freak out a little bit. So these things combined sort of lead to them having a spat after he beats Todd.
And also Roxy, because this happens way soon after that too.
Roxy comes like right in the middle of it, and she
Yeah.
just sort of worsens things.
Yeah, Roxy is the fourth evil ex, and Roxy's a girl, which is why they never say evil ex boyfriends.
Well, why she never says
Yeah.
evil ex-boyfriend.
It's always evil exes instead.
Yeah.
So after that, they have like another giant spat, and things are sort of up in the air. We don't really know what's going on. But the next fight, on the list the actual physical list that Ramona gives Scott. Happens to be the Katayanagi twins. He's like, who are the Katayanagi twins? To which Stephen Stills goes, oh, you don't know? And then they also happen to be the next band that they have to fight in this still battle of the bands that they're going through. They're a twin Japanese brother duo who like do electronica music and whatever
On their keys.
This is, again, they take a whole book to do all of this in the comic books, but this is just in one scene.
Yeah, this
here
is like a 10
where they do
in
an
the movie.
do an amp versus amp fight.
Yeah, like the twins don't even get any dialogue.
Yeah, they don't say a single word.
Which is, if you read the books, it's a shame. But in the context of the movie, it's kind of fine.
Yeah.
Like the way the pacing is sort of led up to it, it works fine.
In the audience of this fight, though, happens to be G-Man Graves and Ramona. They're like together. And so Scott is like pretty determined, though. Like he's gonna win this, He's gonna win this. He's gonna also win back Ramona.
Yeah.
And so they play their songs, the way that it's visualized is very awesome too.
It's very like Rampage. Do you remember that game?
Yeah,
That's like the first thing that sort of popped into my head.
You know, a lot of people have made that comparison too, but I didn't.
There's a fighting game, a really old arcade game. It's not Rampage. And I remember this immediately brought it into my head because it is sort of a fight that basically through their music, the Katinagi twins summon like a twin Shenron dragon type thing.
Are you thinking of Primal Rage?
I think I am thinking of Primal Rage.
Oh.
So Sex Bomb winds up summoning this giant gorilla thing. And there was an old like arcade fighting game that I think was Primal Rage where it was kind of like that, where it's just these big giant creatures or whatever fighting each other. I don't know if that was the reference specifically it was trying to make, but that is definitely where my head went. So, yeah.
So they win. The Sex Bomb wins.
And like in the midst of it, Steven Stills remarks that, oh, Gideon's here in the audience. And based on the list, Scott knows that Gideon is number 7. And at this point, he puts together that G-Man Graves and Gideon Graves are the same person.
And that Ramona is back with him.
Yeah.
So there's a scene back outside there where G-Man Graves is like ready to just completely sign Sex Bomb, sort of despite Scott though.
Yeah.
And Ramona says, I'm back with him. Like he just has this control over me.
He has his way of getting in my head.
Yeah. And so that's that. Scott is also kicked out of the band. Young Neil, who's another player, comes in and joins Sex Bomb instead.
Scott's life sucks.
Scott's life sucks.
So he goes back home.
And he gets a call from Gideon saying, like, hey, man, no hard feelings, but, Sex Bomb is playing at my new Chaos Theater, and I just wanted you to come up and come to the party, And, he asks, like, is Ramona with you? And he's like, hey, are you with me? And she was like...
She nods.
Yeah, she nods, and he's like, yeah, she's with me. And then he goes, okay.
Because he spilled hot cocoa on himself.
Yeah. And so at the encouragement of his roommate Wallace, he decides to storm the Chaos Theater and take on Gideon. He does so, he goes through his guards, and Gideon is all like, you really gonna do this for her? And he's like, yes, because I love her. And then a sword shoots out of his chest because Scott Pilgrim's earned the power of love, with some stats on the side too. It's beautiful. So he takes on all the guards, but is not strong enough to take on Gideon. He's almost down, and then who should show up but Knives?
Yeah.
Knives shows up because she wants to get revenge on Ramona finally for taking Scott, because Scott would never have cheated on her otherwise.
No.
So then Scott finally has to intervene, and is just sort of like, I cheated on you. And it was like, and so basically
there's a moment where they both are looking at him like, you cheated on us.
Yeah. And he's like,
no,
I cheated on one of you.
Yeah. The other one.
And Gideon takes that opportunity to get him and
to stab him in
and
the back.
He's dead.
Yeah.
In back in his dream world, he has this short little monologue with Ramona where she like finally kind of comes clean with everything, where it seems like Gideon like actually has some sort of like mechanized control over her. That's the only thing that's sort of like oddly not explained.
That is the weakest point.
And it's also not in the books either.
But
it's explained in a different way in the books.
There is a reason it is there because of the books, which we'll get to.
So basically though, earlier in the movie, he got a 1-up.
Yeah.
Which you sort of like, oh, that's a cute video game sort of reference, whatever, like that. But no, he actually gets a 1-up. And so he's able to do the whole thing over again. Only this time when Gideon is like, you really want to do this for her? He instead answers, no, I want to do this for myself.
Yeah.
And then another sword shoots out of his chest, and it says, Scott Pilgrim's earned the power of self-respect. And this time it is stronger to take on Gideon. He's able to preemptively sort of stop Knives from getting onto Ramona and just confesses right there on the spot, which sort of takes care of Ramona's like mechanized control for whatever reason.
Yeah.
That's just kind of weird.
Yeah.
So basically, they fight more and more, Gideon and Scott. Gideon seems to get the upper hand until Knives and Scott join up, and they're able.
Ramona helps too.
And Ramona helps too, and then Gideon is gone.
Yeah.
That's basically the end of the movie.
Yeah. There's a moment where, at the end of the movie, there's kind of a question of who Scott's going to end up with, because throughout the whole movie, it really paints Knives as the much more sympathetic one. Like, you feel bad for Knives. Like, she's really sweet in a weird crazy way. And so there's a moment where it looks like he's gonna get with Knives, but Knives is like, no, you need to be with Ramona. Like, she's the one you've been fighting for the whole time. And so they decide basically to try again, just to start over, and they get together, and that's the end of the movie. Describing it in this way is really making me realize how we don't do it justice this way at all.
I know.
It's really strange. It's because this movie is made up of so many individual moments that are brilliant. The overarching story isn't really what it's about. And that is more so for the movie than for the books. The books have a really nice overarching story where the characters have much more of like an arc, if you will. There's no real arc to Ramona in the movie, right? She's mostly just the object. And
yeah, you're right.
And, you know, it's going to be weird to sit here and say these things because it's going to sound like this isn't one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
Or it shouldn't be, but it is. It's just not for these reasons. It's for all the other things it does. You still feel connected to Scott, right? Like, for me, at least, when I watch the movie, even though he's a jerk, he's still really likable somehow. Or was I alone in that?
No, you're right. I think only Michael Cera could have delivered that way, you know,
Yeah.
where it's like, yeah, like he is a jerk and he does own up to it in the end.
But he's not like trying to be a jerk.
No.
He just doesn't want to deal with the consequence of his actions.
Yeah.
Like, and that is very much in the book too. So that's cool, but it's very different. There's no way to talk about this movie and say what makes it great without its humor. And there's no way to express its humor over air because Edgar Wright does such a good job of using the visuals. And did you want to talk about that anymore? No, we kind of hit on all of it.
Yeah, I mean, like we could, but like we're just gonna be talking about it every single thing
or
in
even
the movie.
even the sound effects, the way sound effects are used at just the right moments, or the right use of a video game soundtrack or a sound effect versus like a more traditional sound effect. You know, it's all done very intentionally and very well. Every joke feels so intentional. Like they spent so much time crafting exactly where all the pieces would be.
Yeah.
You know? It's just very carefully crafted.
The best part of it is its consistency too.
Yes.
It's like the movie never lets up on that sort of comic book style.
No. It always has something else for you to keep you laughing. Like, even if it's not from the book or something, like the weird sitcom-y part. He comes home after
Yeah, there's a part where he comes home after, you know, getting a little bit of something from Ramona.
getting to first and a half base.
And the Seinfeld theme plays.
Yeah.
With like sitcom laugh track. Like
It sounds terrible. It really does. If you told me that's what happened in this movie, I'd be like, I don't want to see that movie. That sounds dumb.
And then like without like unceremoniously, it's gone.
Yeah, it's just
It's there for a couple of
when-
gags.
Yeah, like Wallace flips a switch, which is actually like for his stove or whatever, and that's just the end of the laugh. But that, like, you can tell that marks the end of the laugh track at the
Yeah.
same time. It's really
Like
clever,
they didn't just
really
like
subtle.
They weren't just like, oh, you know, it'd be funny here. We did some sitcom laughter, and that's random. It's funny, you know.
Yeah.
They were like, yeah, and then we can line it up with this switch right there. Like it'll be great. Like
Yeah,
it was just thought out. It was thought out super well, and it was consistent the entire time.
yeah. And all the acting was really good too, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Like Wallace was fantastic.
Wallace is fantastic.
Wallace was so good.
Kim Pine is fantastic.
It's a shame we haven't talked about Kim at all up to this point.
Well, you know what? She doesn't really get as much as a spotlight in the movie as she does in the book.
Exactly.
In the book, she is an absolute integral player.
Oh my gosh.
In the movie, they do mention that Scott and Kim were once an item.
Yeah.
The book, this is a much, much bigger conflict in the book, but you can
Yes.
see in the movie that, you know, Kim is always very just sort of like, whatever.
Scott, if your life had a face, I would punch it.
Mhm, yeah, very much like that. And it's only towards the end of the movie, Scott, like, you know, to like be better about himself. He's like, you know, Kim, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about everything. I'm sorry about me, you
Yeah.
know, and like, and you can see that she accepts the apology too and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you know. That's a gigantic arc though in the book that spans a couple of books, I think.
It doesn't really get resolved until the last book.
No.
It's mostly It mostly comes up in the last two books, or when it's really at its height. But it's not until the last book that it gets resolved, and it's a big growth point for Scott in the books.
Envy Adams also has a much larger role in the books than in the movie.
Yeah, in like an interesting, weird way.
Yeah,
It's kind of weird in the books.
you guys just need to read the books. You just need to read the books. The books like delve into a lot of like pretty kind of like a teenagery topics, kind of.
But it's not teenage; it's young adult. It really is like this is the struggle of young adults. Like now, I don't know. There's really not a good way to put it other than that. It's real in a strange way where it doesn't take itself too seriously. The best thing I could compare it to, I don't know, would you say that this series has a similar humor and tone to Undertale?
As in like the serious moments?
How it handles the serious moments and their style of humor. Because Undertale, which I link again to Earthbound, have this really weird way of touching on like really heavy stuff to where by the end you feel like you learned something kind of. But during the book, you never feel like it's teaching you. It always handles them in the midst of humor. Like it doesn't force you to stay there any longer than you want to.
I think I would agree with that. I still don't know if I would say this reminds me of Undertale, but I think I agree with your comparison here. Because the books do go pretty deep.
They go pretty serious.
They go very serious and very symbolic.
Yeah.
The bulk of the I guess even the movie too, but the bulk of the books deal with like dealing with being hurt from a relationship.
Yes.
And being able to move on from that. In Scott's case, he pretty much pretended like it never happened.
He the running gag is that he has an awful memory. He forgets it. He forgets like his brother a couple times in the book. He like forgets how he and whoever his exes broke up, or he like invents these wild and crazy stories around it. And he'll like invent these things. And later on, it's revealed that Gideon has a little bit of a part in that as well. But Scott does enough of it on its own to make it pretty bad. It's more that he's just not facing up to his own mistakes, and he doesn't really understand why things keep going wrong because he doesn't want to deal with his own stuff. So in the book, The Second Sword, there's a similar arc in that. It's interesting to note as well, when this movie was finished, the book series was not finished.
Right, the last book wasn't out
book
yet.
6 was not out. Bryan Lee O'Malley was in the process of writing it, so he actually said that he took a few ideas from the movie to put in his book. Specifically sort of the visual design of the Chaos Theater. I think one thing he did was, where he's going down in the movie and there's like a down arrow pointing. That's sort of the visual thing.
Oh, wow.
You remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah,
but like, how about that? Edgar Wright knows Bryan Lee O'Malley's style better than Bryan Lee O'Malley.
Yeah, and so Bryan Lee O'Malley saw it. He's like, I'm going to put that in my book too, in the 6th book, because it's not done yet. I think that was one where he did that. But in the movie, it sort of leads you to think he's getting back with knives because that was originally what they wanted to do in the movie. But then Bryan Lee O'Malley was like, no, he is going to wind up with Ramona. And so they kind of went back and forth like, well, it's our own thing. So do we want to have him? No, we'll have him get back with Ramona. And that's part of why it feels a little weak, because the final battle with Gideon is like, it's very much knives and Scott against the world. They are the ones taking down Gideon. It does a nice callback to a moment earlier in the movie when on one of their dates they're playing Ninja Revolution, which is actually Dance Dance Revolution. So that's kind of why it feels like that. But again, in the book, the scene with the sword where he does, spoiler, he dies in the book and has a 1-up or whatever. And he gets his second sword when he gets back, but it's not called the power of self-respect. It's called the power of understanding, because in the book, Gideon isn't so much in the movie, Gideon is like, I'm just better than you.
Yeah.
Right. And that's sort of the running thing. Like Todd is just better than him because he's a vegan and he's a better bass player. And Lucas Lee is just better than him because he's a freaking movie star and like a skateboard legend. And he kind of only beats him. He kind of only beats both those guys because he tricks them. And in the book, it's kind of a similar thing where he kind of just beats them out of dumb luck. But he beats them. And that's not, the point isn't really that he's better than these guys in the book. But in the movie, that's more the thing, and it's represented through his shirts too. Because when he's fighting Todd, like all of the X's have like their numbers like all around them, right?
Yeah.
Matthew Patel always does a stance where he sticks his finger up in the air like a one. Todd has Lucas Lee has the number 2 tattooed on his neck.
Yeah.
Just because, I guess.
Todd has a number 3 on his shirt.
Yeah, and while he's fighting Todd, Scott has the word just 0 on his shirt. And then after he fights Roxy, he has like a Fantastic Four shirt, except this is 4.5, which is just like weird. But it's much more about Scott coming into being more confident on who he is and also dealing with his stuff and like dealing with it in a confident way and not trying to hide anything. In the book, as opposed to just being better than him and him having to get over that, in the book, it's more that Gideon is what Scott could be.
Right.
It's that villain trope of the villain is who the hero could be if he took a different path, and who he was sort of heading on the path towards without really knowing it, up to book 6 in a way.
There's a weird spot in the fight where like Gideon sort of reveals that he has all of his ex-girlfriends like cryogenically frozen until they like love him again.
Yeah.
And that's like, I mean, like that's obviously hugely symbolic, like for anybody who like hasn't gotten over an ex-girlfriend or something like that. And that's essentially what Scott was doing too, because we go through a lot of his ex-girlfriends in there, only he was able to like get over it and just sort of like accept the bad, you know what I mean? That's
how he ends up growing. Because for most of the book, he just kind of ignores it and sort of either plays the victim himself or just acts like it was fine. It was never a big deal. It didn't really matter. So, and like I said, in the book, it's about the power of understanding. So once he understands the mistakes he made and understands like the horrible person he had been, that is his moment. And when he understands that he could have been Gideon if he had not sort of fixed himself, that's what sort of gives him the strength to push through. Whereas in the movie, it is more about him being more comfortable. And he winds up just handing over his position in the band to young Neil, who he affectionately now refers to as Neil. So it's more about him being comfortable in his own skin and like finding the power of self-respect. But it's really hard. This is the worst. This was a terrible idea.
Yeah. This ended up being a lot more difficult than I thought it would be.
This sucks. Don't listen to us.
All I wanted to do was just share how much we love this movie, and now I just feel bad.
The books are better, and the movie even tells you so through Como's like random dialogue. But that little dialogue is great, and you can watch this movie so many times, and you'll always catch something new. This is something that I actually saw in it was like in a director's cut or something. But do you remember the scene where Ramona and Scott are on the bus after he beats Matthew Patel?
Yeah.
Do you look in the lights in the background?
No.
If you look in the lights in the background, when Ramona is sort of uncertain and talking about how he's got to beat her evil exes, if you look at the lights in the background, they're all X's. All the lights in the street and like the reflection of the light are all X's. And then you go back to Scott and you look at the lights outside the window on his side, and they're all little hearts. Because he's like, so we're dating. And then by the end of the scene in Ramona's window, they're all hearts as well.
I think I'm gonna have to rewind then.
Yeah, and it's those little things that you catch one time in this movie that you never caught before, because all of it's visual humor, but it's not slapstick, right? Which, and we actually watched kind of a slapstick visual humor thing afterwards that Saul was really into. I'm not into that kind of humor. That doesn't really do it for me. But like the timing and like Saul was saying, how he uses the frame, it's all so smart and it's all so quick.
I mean, that sums up Edgar Wright too.
Yeah.
Any of his movies like does that masterfully.
And talking about Edgar Wright, how I didn't like, so I saw Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. And I think part of it is, I don't want to be a prude, but like they were a little gory. Like it was a little much for me. It was a little too much for me to enjoy the movie. And I don't know, the aesthetic of Scott Pilgrim was so convincing and so intentional and so gorgeous. Like they use all these video game and like comic book effects. And yeah, okay, maybe it preyed on my nostalgia a little bit, but it all looks good. right? Like Gideon, when Gideon pulls out his sword at the end fight, it's like the 8-bit sword, but it's not just that it's an 8-bit sword. It's like it pixelates everything around it in like a really cool looking way. Like it just looks awesome. Like 8-bit is a thing. Look, full disclosure, I'm gamer Dave, gamer nerd. I never owned an NES until I got married and I inherited my wife's. So the 8-bit era is like, that's actually like before my time, like legitimately. So when people are like, oh, 8-bit nostalgia, woo, I'm like, sorry, man. Like, even if I didn't have that self-respect that Saul was talking about, didn't want to get suckered into this, like, it's just not there. But the sword is just cool because of all the visual effects they mix in with it, right? And they put in around it. If we want to talk about the other things that the movie does different from the book, I thought it handled X's number 2 and 3 better than the book did.
Yes.
It undoubtedly handled 4, 5, I would say 4 through 7 worse, but it handled 2 and 3 better.
I mean, when we say worse, it's still not bad in the movie.
It's not bad. It's just they couldn't handle it with as much care because it's an 1.5 to 2 hour movie as opposed to 6 graphic novels. And you're working within the limitations of your medium, and this movie does it right. Like it just does. Like if you watched it, I think it would be hard to. You wouldn't be watching this movie for the story. You're going to be watching it for like the emotional relationship between Ramona and Scott. And that's fine because the movie isn't trying to do that. When I like to talk about movies, a lot of times I like to talk in terms of what the movie was trying to do and whether or not it succeeded. Because if a movie isn't trying to do something, how can I criticize it for it, right? Like if it's not central to the plot, like the relationship between Ramona and Scott, why would I like condemn this movie for that? It's not trying to do that. Now, would it be better if that was there? Maybe, but it might have taken too much away from the comedy. It might have taken too much of that time, or it might have caused the movie to drag. This movie didn't put anything in it that would cause a drag. Is the book better, quote unquote, more emotional because I get Kim's backstory and I get what her relationship with Scott is? Yes, but the movie just can't do that, and it doesn't try to shoehorn it in. It would have been much worse if they tried to shoehorn it in and not done it credit. It was much better that they just ignored it pretty much completely. And that was fine because that was exactly what the movie was trying to do. It was trying to make you laugh and make you care for the characters enough, right? Make you care for Knives enough that you felt bad at her and you like had some like sympathy for her in her moments of craziness, which happened throughout the movie.
And spoiler alert, you do.
Yeah, you do.
You
and
absolutely
same with Michael
do.
Cera. Same with Michael Cera's Scott Pilgrim. You care enough about him while being sort of exasperated at what an idiot he is. And the other characters, Wallace, it's a shame we haven't talked about. Wallace is like the star of this movie. When I first saw this movie, it was like, Wallace is the greatest character. Wallace is just absolutely the best thing about this movie. Even if he is the other Culkin.
I mean, I don't know if I agree with that, but
Really?
but I do love his character.
Well, you're a big fan of Knives, though, huh? If you had to pick one character who's like the standout star.
That's hard. I mean, yeah, I would probably,
I would say
it would be easy for me to say Knives. I would like to say Steven Stills, but he's not as prominent a character as either of those.
Yeah.
So I guess I would say Knives.
Yeah. I just think Wallace is or X number 2 and 3. Because in the book there really isn't that much of a fight with X number 2.
In number 2, so he's still the same guy. He's still Lucas Lee. He's still a movie actor,
Skateboarder.
after being a skateboarder. Yeah. But the fight, like, he's a little more apathetic than blasé, and he's even like, all right, fine, like I'll just say that you won if you pay me like $500. And
He's a sellout.
Yeah. And so they still don't even fight, but he still dies the same way.
Yeah.
Grinding down garbage rails. And number 3, that fight is just drawn out a whole lot. They end up doing a challenge at the very famous Toronto Megastore, the late great Honest Ed's.
All right, I did miss that scene. That was a good scene. But.
I mean, not to go into too much detail, but they basically both get completely overwhelmed with Honest Ed's to the point where Todd just blows up the place with his psychic powers.
Oh, that's kind of sad now that it's gone.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot,
They could have
Todd.
immortalized it, yeah.
Gosh. But it's also the vegan. He loses his powers in the same way where the vegan police show up, but in the book it takes more time to watch Envy and her relationship with Todd, to where Todd is actually like cheating on her and he's just a big douche, and he cheats on his veganism too because he's a rock star and he doesn't care or whatever. So in the movie, those are still there in the background, like where he punches the highlights out of Knives' hair.
No, it's not him.
Yeah, it is.
It's the drummer.
No, well, in the book, it's the drummer. In the movie, he punches the highlights out of her hair.
I thought you were still talking about
No. Well, I'm trying. I guess I'm going back for it. So thank you for clarifying. But like in the movie, he punches the highlights out of her hair, and he's like, "I'm not afraid to hit a girl. I'm a rock star." And so I think
You're
they did
incorrigible.
that. I don't know the meaning of the word.
He really
actually
doesn't.
doesn't. Which is also a gag from the book. But they inserted it into this scene because they needed to show that he was a dick, basically. And so instead of having the drummer do it, they just had him do it, which was correct. This was the correct thing to do, the correct way to handle that situation. And so in the book, there's actually there's no him tricking him into drinking half and half. The vegan police just sort of show up and get him for eating gelato and chicken parmesan. And it's like, I think Scott says something like, I could really use a convenient Deus Ex Machina to beat this guy right
Yeah,
now.
that's right, he does.
Yeah.
Man, I love these books.
So
I have to
it's
reread
still
them.
funny, but in terms of, I think he did that sort of intentionally to leave you a little unsatisfied at the end of the fight. Because again, in the book, it's not as much about him. He's much more confident in the book, in a weird, Scott is, in like a weird way where he's sort of cocky, in like a quiet, likable way. I don't know how to describe it. Whereas in the movie, it is much more about him sort of proving himself to himself. So he gets that moment in the movie where he outsmarts him at least. And it is more satisfying. So I don't think the book would have suffered much for having him end the fight that way.
Yeah.
Even if it is a little cliched, which the movie acknowledges. But it throws in that twist so where it feels a little bit more rewarding and humorous. Mm-hmm. And then the moments with the vegan police are just hilarious. So it all feels right.
So, you know what? We could go on for hours and hours. But
I'm just not sure if it would do you guys any good.
No, but this episode, I mean, straight up has just been a big, like, sort of love letter to the movie, the books, the franchise in general, and just like what it meant to both of us. You know, it was video game enough, you know, for it to be entertaining, but it wasn't the central focus of it.
It was a guy who grew up with these video games who made a reference to them without it. In the book especially, there's a lot of, like, Clash at Demon Head is an old NES game, and in the book there's more like band names that show up throughout the like history of the game. Like Kid Chameleon is one.
Oh yeah.
Which is an old Sega platformer, which is like, it's so obscure I had no idea that it was that for a while. There's a couple other ones, like, but I guess that's not important. But it's all like in the context of just being humorous, as opposed to like, hey, read my book because I said this Nintendo game's title. Right. Yeah. Which is the same way it is in the movie.
I mean, like, what was one of the biggest ones? Like how, like, you know, because Ramona uses like a lot of like time, like interdimensional, like travel doors. Yeah. And like Scott asks like Super Mario Brothers 2?
Yeah. And it is. It's pretty much exactly like that. They've got that's why they have the star.
The star
on
on the door, yeah.
Yeah, because that's what they had in Super Mario 2. Or like the Chaos Theater. I didn't actually get this one at first either, but the Chaos Theater, it's just a reference to Earthbound, because that was a place in Earthbound. With the
I didn't
Chaos
know that.
Theater. Yeah,
I didn't know
the
that.
Chaos Theater was a place in Earthbound, so that's why he named it the Chaos Theater. But it's just a cool sounding name, so you throw it in there, and the people who get it, and you don't need to get it to find it funny.
In the book, also Scott starts a new band called Shatter Band.
Shatter Band,
which is a reference to the NES game Shatter Hand.
Yeah. Just little things like that.
Oh man, you know what? I'm reading the books.
Yeah.
I'm rereading the books right away. That's what I'm going to do as soon as we're done here. Because there's a lot of jokes here that I would love to talk about, but would just be like
wasted.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, reading the books is sort of an emotional investment for me. Because I get to the end and I start to wonder, like, am I like Scott too? Am I dealing with it? And this is from a guy who has like an ex-girlfriend. And it's still kind of like, am I running away from my past? Am I running away? Oh gosh, I'm a terrible person. Because Scott, in the books especially, but in the movie too, he feels very much like an everyman. It's really kind of easy to connect yourself to him.
Yeah.
Without him being like a Bella from Twilight or whatever. It's not like he's an empty husk. He just feels like a normal dude who just has random, normal, everyday problems that are exacerbated by the fact that he's in a comic book world and the best fighter in the province, I guess. So,
So, like I said, we could go on, but I think we're gonna have to just stop right here.
yeah.
Suffice it to say that if you've not seen this movie, and you're kind of into the stuff that we talk about on this podcast, this movie you're more than likely going to like it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I recommend reading the books first and then watching the movie, because our experience was movie first and then the books.
It's always hard to recommend reading the books first because you're always going to notice what isn't there. I would probably recommend watching the movie first because it is much less of an investment. Like, if you're going to go read the books, you're going to spend a bit of money because you're going to have to buy 6 graphic novels.
Yeah.
If you go watch the movie, it's not that much of an investment, and it gets your foot in the door to where, do you like this? Okay, if you like this, you're going to like the books. And the movie does it exactly how the movie needed to do it. It is brilliantly done. But then the books are just going to add a bunch of stuff on top of it.
Plus, you're going to see frames that are exactly done from the movie into
And
the book into the movie.
That's going to help you.
You're going to see
appreciate it even
dialogue
more, too.
directly lifted. You're going to see just how close these characters look from their casting. It's going to be a beautiful thing for you.
Yeah, it's true.
So-
and I mean, we'll just end. You said that I'm not ready to like rank and hierarchies of movies, like where this would rank, because it just takes too much thinking. I have to think about what movies I've actually seen. But where you said you would put this in like your top 5 movies or top 3?
I think top 5 is a safer bet. Yeah.
All right.
I don't know. Like, there's only 2 movies that I know are in my top 5.
Okay.
One of them is Scott Pilgrim, obviously. The other one is the Grand Budapest Hotel. That's probably not going to make it on a podcast, but it is definitely one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, if I was gonna put mine in the list, the 3 that I would say are almost certainly in there are Scott Pilgrim, Tangled, and Kung Fu Panda 2. Kung Fu Panda 2 specifically.
I guess we'll have to talk about that one eventually then too.
We should.
Or maybe just the whole trilogy.
I mean, not all at once.
Well, okay. Anyways, in conclusion, watch it.
Yeah.
If you've already seen it, watch it again.
Hey, if you like beat 'em ups, play the game too. Why not?
There you go. Yeah,
All right,
I love it.
we're done here.
We're done here? All right. If you stuck around for the entirety of the podcast, you deserve a medal. Yeah, so that's it, right? Yeah, I'm going to go read the books.
Okay.
Alrighty, so thank you again just for hanging on. This is our 13th episode, so unlucky number 13.
Something like that.
Special thanks again to Danny Barrett-Hubert for the wonderful artwork. Special thanks again to the combined efforts of OC Remix, Rob KTA, and Expert Novice for the intro and outro music. That's about it, right?
That's about it.
Alrighty.
Like and share us and talk us and whatever else on social media.
all that nonsense.
We'd appreciate it. And it'd be fun to interact with you guys.
Please.
Even if you disagree with us like you
Please.
like you heathens on Totoro. How dare you.
Oh, that's right. We did get some disagreeers on that.
To people who didn't even listen to it.
Yeah.
What a waste of my social media time. Get out of here.
Oh, we'll see you on the next one.
Take care.